Alright, so now I'm talking about diminishing returns. So, in personal growth, or whenever you're trying to do something, there's a point where you're spending money or spending resources, you're not getting much of a gain back for what you're spending. Like the value exchange just isn't that great. For example, if you're trying to learn something, like let's say we're trying to learn piano skills, right? At some point, trying to add, 100 extra hours of piano teaching might not lead you to where you want to be if you're learning at like a beginner level. Like let's say you are at an advanced level and you're taking, hundreds of hours of basics. You're not going to get to an advanced level by doing that. You're not going to get to a better level by just taking more basic classes over and over again and just throwing more money at learning basics. At some point, you reach a level where there's diminishing returns for the resources you're putting into something. That's just one area I can think of. Like let's say the same thing with exercise. Like at some point, I can add a couple extra hours on a treadmill or something, going at the same speed that I was going day after day after day after day after day. But if I don't change the speed at which I'm going, if I don't change the intensity, there could be a diminishing return where I don't see any gains for what I'm doing because my body is adapted to it. And of course, I'm no fitness expert, but that's just an example I could think of in my head. Let's say with investments, I guess, if you keep investing in something, there could be a point where you reach a point of diminishing returns, where you're not gaining as much value back for your investment. That's another area to consider. That's more nuanced, though. And the situations there are a lot of like sticky points and details. It's probably not the best example. Let's see. Writing, for example, is another area where there's diminishing returns. Now, if you're working on a project for, 3 hours for the day, and you just decide, well, I'm going to add 4 more hours onto my writing session, you might not get as much more done in that 4 hours. You might just reach a point of burnout where you're not working as much, even though you're putting technically more hours into the project. You're probably not going to get back what you're spending into it in terms of time. It might be more beneficial just to not put as much time into it for the day. Cut back a bit, and you actually might gain more of an advantage than if you threw more hours into something. So when looking at situations, it's good to try and figure out when you've reached a point where throwing, resources, money, time, or anything starts to not make as much sense. And it's a skill that it takes time to figure out. And it is, as I said, nuanced. It's not simple. You're not going to immediately understand, well, if I do X, Y, then Z will be the outcome. Not every time you're going to know that. It's going to take some experience to get to that point and to that level. So that's something to consider. I plan on making a more longer video with some notes to try and make diminishing returns make sense. And I might do like a differentiation between diminishing returns and plateaus, because there are some similarities, but it's not so... The two are not exactly the same to my understanding. So we'll look at that and try and figure that out as we go. So thank you for listening.